The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Talking about the last email that was sent where he wanted to know what you did this week. You know why he wanted that, by the way? I thought it was great because we have people that don't show up to work and nobody even knows if they work for the government. So by asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist. There was a lot of genius in sending it. We're trying to find out if people are working. And so we're sending a letter to people. Please tell us what you did last week. If people don't respond, it's very possible that there is no such person or they're not working.
Elon Musk has zero legal authority to fire government employees or force their resignations. These people don't report to Elon Musk.
This nonsensical email from Elon Musk acting like we're in kindergarten.
It's like an own the libs, make you cry more sort of environment, right? Where both Trump and Musk are performing for the MAGA base.
The new Trump administration is reveling in its bare knuckle approach to governing.
This is so sloppy with the way Elon Musk is handling this.
I got this email Saturday afternoon, about 3 p.m., and I felt absolutely infuriated getting this email with a demand within 48 hours to provide a response on what I did within the last week or face termination. This is clearly an attempt from Elon Musk to harass and bully and intimidate the federal workforce, which is part of his broader plan to gut the federal workforce and privatize public sector services to ensure that corporations like his own can get more profit. And that makes me really angry, and my coworkers as well.
I don't think anybody would have an issue with cutting some government waste, with identifying programs that are not working. But the way they are doing it is haphazard. It is dangerous. It is frankly abusive of federal workers, and it is just plain wrong.
And it's random.
It's abusive. It's abusive.
Yes, I do. I do think that. I think the way that they are. Yeah, I think the way that they are treating them.
Why? How is this? How is this abusive?
Scott, have you ever gotten an email from someone that said you better do this or else you're going to resign?
Yeah, it's called having the boss in the private sector.
From someone who's not your boss.
Well, the White House is every federal worker's boss. That's number one.
Elon Musk is not anybody.
Scott, how is Elon going to evaluate? I mean, how is he going to evaluate the work of thousands of federal employees when he has no idea what
he's not? The test was, are you even paying attention to your email? Are you even at your terminal?
Some federal workers, he sent it on a weekend. Some federal workers do not have access to their emails on the weekends. They just don't.
Did they go to work today? I mean, look, the amount of outrage, melting down, and sort of outpouring of emotion over this ought to tell you everything you need to know. We had a lady on CNN today, a supposed federal worker, who said she was infuriated by getting this email. She had time to go on CNN, but she didn't have time to send a 30-second email saying, well, here's what I was working on last week. This is what people in the private sector have come to hate about how they view the public sector.
Putting together a list of accomplishments was maybe the most work some of these bureaucrats did all year. If it's that hard for you to name 5 things you've accomplished in a week, that should tell you something. And if it makes you mad or infuriated that you're being asked, that should also tell you something. It tells me a lot of these federal workers don't want to justify their jobs because they feel they're entitled. And that's a bad attitude.
That this is even controversial, it tells you a lot about the character of our nation. And as I've said before, even though some of these changes that you see with the Trump administration are refreshing and encouraging, when you think about the moral rot, the national sins, the sickness from head to toe, I mean, it's on full display with something that shouldn't even be controversial. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show. You can get to the live video stream of this program at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel, rumble.com/Trumpet Daily. So lots to get to on today's show. I did, though, want to just focus in on this this government efficiency push. I've had some of these stories in my notes for quite a few days, just haven't been able to work my way up to them. But I guess with this, the Elon Musk email, a work review, a productivity review. What are you doing? And then, like one of them noted there, I mean, if you make time, you have the time to go on CNN. And which, in the private sector, who has that even as an option? Yeah, I got fired at Walmart because they said I wasn't productive because I didn't answer to an employee review. You can't run to CNN. Why would CNN even accommodate this? And how are people across the board not applauding what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing? They're eliminating waste. And there's plenty of waste to be eliminated. As Kevin O'Leary said, they need to do it 20% more. They need to cut 20% more than what they've discovered. These are successful business people who know what it takes to come in and to turn a company that's not turning a profit, to turn it around. You start by making cuts. I mean, this is a biblical principle. Read John 15 sometime and see what Jesus said there about fruit, producing fruit. Even the fruitful vines or even the fruitful branches need to be pruned back so that they can produce more fruit. That's what God's interested in. That's what brings glory to God. I'll take you through a few passages from the Gospels here in a moment. I should have put that one down in my notes. John 15, I mean, it's so basic. And as I say, there's so much waste to trim. This is from, I think it's from a Trumpet feature we had last week. The Department of Government Efficiency has identified $4.7 trillion in payments by the U.S. Treasury that are difficult or impossible to trace. $4.7 trillion. We don't know where it went. We can't even trace the payments. We don't know what it was for. And then these same people, to have someone email, think of the lady there saying that, well, some people don't have access to their emails on the weekend. How unfair. You know what the private sector is thinking. You know why 72% of Americans favor this. And then you look at some of these talking heads, as I said yesterday, they can't even keep their own shows going because the ratings are dismal. Listen to Brian Stelter. He lost his show on CNN. I guess they have him back for a panel or two. But listen to him describe how that this may seem like common sense, what Elon Musk is doing. But of course it's not. It's not common sense. Clip 6.
And I think we should recognize to a lot of Americans, this makes perfect sense, right? Tell us what you did last week. What are your accomplishments? Lots of people are used to doing that in their jobs. Of course, it gets really complicated really quickly when you're dealing with classified information or if you're not checking your work email over the weekend. So I understand it's not the common sense that he claims it is, but I think we should understand why people, this appeals to people, why the memes appeal to a lot of people, right? It's actually nonsense, but it sounds like common sense.
Mm-hmm. There you go. There's your soundbite. It's actually nonsense, but it sounds like common sense. And this is why people think it's common sense. Because you need to communicate to the higher ups. This is what I've been doing. This is what I haven't been doing. It's like Donald Trump says, a lot of these people probably don't even exist. I mean, we're making Social Security payments to millions of Americans over 100 years old. You do the math. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Let's get a response. Do you go into the office? What are you working on? What are your projects? It's a national mindset, really, that should be most concerning here. We had an article, this was from 2010, so 15 years ago, at the Trumpet magazine, or the Trumpet.com. Joel Hilliker wrote, "Meet tomorrow's workforce, materialistic young people who hate hard work and think the world owes them a living." Even the Apostle Paul in 1 Thessalonians, or maybe it's 2 Thessalonians 3, but he says, look, quit being a busybody, quit talking about people, quit being a gossip and murmuring and criticizing, and get to work. Use your hands. Do something productive with your life. Hard work is one of the evidences of a true Christian. Did you know this? God says in 1 Timothy 5, he's directing this to fathers, to heads of households. He says, if you don't provide for your own, you're worse than an infidel. You're an unbeliever. It shows how far removed we are from the biblical work ethic. They're materialistic young people who hate hard work and think the world owes them a living. You see this, really, it's worldwide, as I've said recently, with respect to all of these nations or these international programs that have been receiving handouts from the U.S. government. As soon as the money dries up, they start screaming, what happened? Where's all the money? Play the British guy. I think it's 15 or 16. He's sounding the alarm because one of his wife's programs in Britain lost funding from U.S. aid.
Stopped. Doesn't matter. You have a contract. So, Turquoise Mountain, which my wife Shoshana runs, has a contract, had another $1 million to go. Money just stops.
The money just stopped from U.S. aid. No accountability on this side of the pond. I mean, you can see why this guy's unhappy. I mean, his wife's company was supposed to get another $1 million from Uncle Sam, from U.S. taxpayers. And U.S. taxpayers knew nothing about this. These are the kinds of things that Elon Musk is discovering. And Trump is there saying, cut it off. Stop. Stop with these handouts. We're broke. We're $36 trillion in debt. It says, in a dismal economy, Generation Y is entering the workforce with sky-high expectations. They want it all. Cushy jobs, high pay, great benefits, without all the icky hard work. I mean, there's only a few hard workers even left in America. Everybody wants the cushy job. And Jesse Waters made a good point last week, saying that it was no problem for Democrats to just shut down the government to send home all the non-essential employees. Now everybody's essential. Now everybody shouldn't be treated like a kindergartner. I mean, you should just be able to go to work, do your own thing, and never, 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 never have to report to a supervisor. There's actually a lot of scriptures, you can read it in Ephesians 6, that talk about the work environment, how employees should serve the boss, and how the boss should be a caring boss, an involved boss. People don't want to hear this, though. They just want the cushy job. They want everything to come easy. They want something for nothing. They want to be put on the fast track to $1 million, and they don't want to work for it. It says here, a new study puts hard numbers to a trend that is frustrating many employers, 20-somethings without work ethic or self-discipline who feel entitled to the good life. It says it's a sign of the affluenza that afflicts our culture. In biblical terms, we're rich and increased with goods, yet spiritually miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I mean, the Laodicean example shows us this. He references that there in that paragraph I just read, that you have to work to be a Christian. You have to put in the work. You have to put in the time in prayer, in Bible study, in occasional fasting. Yesterday in Life and Teachings, we talked about the power of prayer together with fasting. And yet most of the modern translations, I forget the exact verse, but they just take out fasting. They just delete it. We go through a harmony of the Gospels, the book that just puts all the gospel accounts in parallel so that you can see what each writer is saying about the same event, if they are writing about the same event. And even in the harmony, they just strike a verse out of the parallel account. It doesn't appear anywhere else. And it's the one that says prayer together with fasting. You probably remember the event. The disciples came to Christ and said, how come we didn't or weren't able to cast out this demon? And Christ's response was that this kind comes out only by prayer and fasting. There's no other way. And so as I was telling the students, that shows you how powerful that tool is. Now, anyone who's fasted for 24 hours or more will tell you that it's not easy. And your flesh is crying out not to do it. It's hard. It's hard to go without food and water for any amount of time, pretty much. But to fast the way that Jesus did in Matthew 4, or Elijah, or Daniel, David, they all did it. They did it to draw closer to God, to build discipline, to resist against the devil. It takes work to be a Christian. As I said, that's one of the evidences of a true Christian. That hard work ethic, whether you look at it spiritually or physically. It says here, Britain is seeing the same trend. Employers there describe British graduates as divas at work who expect everything to fall into their laps. It says, though they consider themselves invaluable, incoming workers are in reality unrealistic, self-centered, fickle, and greedy, bosses say. They consider themselves, though, invaluable. I mean, listen to, skip ahead to Joy Reid. She lost her job. I think that was announced Sunday. Last night, she gave her final program. And then she's on, I guess, her own podcast after that, crying about losing her show. But listen to, she lost her show because no one was watching. Because she's an angry, bitter racist. Let's just call it what it is. Nobody would, whatever she is. Okay, we can leave that aside then. Nobody watched. You think MSNBC would fire her if she was making the network millions and millions and millions of dollars? They fired her because no one was watching her show. But listen to her assessment of her nightly program. This is clip 3.
My show had value, and that, I'm sorry, that what I was doing had value. And in the end, I'm sorry, I try not to cry on TV. And this is kind of like me on TV, so I apologize that I went hard on so many issues, whether it was the Black Lives Matter issues of a young baby or a mom or a dad that was killed, or when we opened up people's eyes to the fact that Asian Americans were being targeted and not just Black folks, or went hard for immigrants who've done nothing but come to this country like my parents did and try to make a life and defended them, or whether we've talked about what the president is doing that is subversive to the Constitution, that is injurious to our liberty, defending books that people find inconvenient, that Nicole Hannah-Jones put into our spirit, that we need to understand 1619 as the real founding of this country. I am not sorry that I stood up for those things, because those things are of God. And I'm a church girl too, and those are the things that I was taught were of God. And so I'm not sorry. I'm just proud of my show.
She's proud of her show. She says, my show had value. It's exactly what Joel Hilliker wrote about 15 years ago in the Trumpet. My show is valuable. I mean, we see ourselves as invaluable. So I need to keep being paid millions and millions of dollars because I'm important. Listen to Rachel Maddow as she commented on Joy Reid's show being canceled. Clip 4.
Joy Reid's show, The Readout, ended tonight. And Joy is not taking a different job in the network. She is leaving the network altogether. And that is very, very, very hard to take. I am 51 years old. I have been gainfully employed since I was 12. And I have had so many different kinds of jobs, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But in all of the jobs I have had, in all of the years I have been alive, there is no colleague for whom I have had more affection and more respect than Joy Reid. I love everything about her. I have learned so much from her. I have so much more to learn from her. I do not want to lose her as a colleague here at MSNBC. And personally, I think it is a bad mistake to let her walk out the door. It is not my call, and I understand that, but that's what I think. I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them. That feels indefensible.
There you go. The network is racist. My bosses are racist because they've fired the black lady who couldn't talk about anything other than race. Grabian has the montage. Look, the receipts are out there. Race, this, all the time. And people were tired of the race baiting. People were tuning it out. But here come the talking heads. They're there telling you, really, they're not telling that many people, are they? Her show's probably going to be canceled next. What a cushy job. She came back for 100 days. I'm talking about Rachel Maddow. 100 days now that Trump's been inaugurated. She's going to do some serious reporting for 3 months, and then it's back to just once a week for her $20 million salary. They love it. Joe Hilliker says, all these problems trace back to our abandoning of biblical morals and supplanting them with artificial virtues of our own design. Artificial virtues. What a comment. It's perfect. A perfect description of what Ephraim and Manasseh are struggling with, our sickness. We have all of these artificial virtues. My show is valuable. My show is important. I'm important. Elon Musk, he's evil. He doesn't have any authority. He shouldn't be sending these emails. He shouldn't be treating us like kindergartners. Listen to Jesse Waters yesterday from The Five. This is clip 9.
Ben Franklin, what did he say? What have you done to make yourself better today? What did you do to make your organization better today? So when I see a request like this, I'm inspired. Other people felt like it was demeaning. And if you think an email like this is demeaning, you're part of the problem. Because if you don't think you have to justify your job and you think you're entitled to your job, then that's why we need an attitude adjustment. This is what this was. This is an attitude adjustment. People need to be reminded that they're public servants. They serve the public. They're not there to serve themselves from the public piggy bank.
Yeah, I mean, even being a public servant, I mean, if it's based on the biblical teaching, as I'll read to you in just a moment, Jesus said to the disciples, look, you're to be servants of all. I mean, it was an all-encompassing directive. You're here to serve everyone. This is what it means to be a true Christian. You're a servant leader. It's more blessed to give than to receive. How many true servants are there in the swamp? Well, as he said there, so many of them are there to just take from the piggy bank, to get the free handout, just like many of these programs internationally. The same mindset, greed, says here in The Hill, Democrats sound the alarm over indiscriminate Pentagon cuts. How dare you cut on defense? I mean, this is something Democrats used to champion. We can't spend this much at the Pentagon. We can't spend this much on defense. But now they're alarmed because there's a Republican administration in town. Democrats across the Capitol were outraged Thursday at news that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered senior Pentagon and military leaders to plan 8% cuts from the defense budget in each of the next 5 years. You see, reality is setting in. We're $36 trillion in debt, and he's calling for 8% cuts when it should be, like Kevin O'Leary says, it should be 20%. It should be even more. I mean, these are the kinds of actions that used to inspire people, like Jesse said there. What have you done this week? How productive were you? How did you serve the country better? What were the items on the to-do list that you were able to check off? Let's take a look at the habit tracker. I mean, there's all kinds of apps online for individual productivity, because it used to be that we wanted to be productive, yeah? But not if you work for Uncle Sam. No, 90% of them, they went and worked from home during COVID. You remember when the Democrats shut down not just government agencies, they shut down the entire economy. They shut down private businesses as well. There were people who lost their jobs, their businesses, their livelihoods because the government said, shut it down. Why? COVID. How many of those people made it to CNN and said, how dare the government shut down my gym or my restaurant? It happened. It happened en masse. But now look at where we are. I mean, it's a bigger story than you might think, because, again, a lot of people will be fired, and they should be. But the mindset, the sickness that this reveals, I mean, it's bad. It's bad. Breitbart, Director of National Intelligence, DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, has identified about $20 million a year in savings for taxpayers by ordering her department staff to cut out all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in coordination with President Trump's executive order. Think of the tens of millions, the hundreds of millions, billions even, worldwide going toward these DEI programs. And they're finally getting cut. And then you hear people screaming over this. Like I said at the top, it shouldn't even be controversial. Listen to the one, this is Representative Crockett, who's basically saying, you know, there was the talk the other day about a $5,000 refund to taxpayers, to households paying taxes, once you pull in all of this government waste. And listen to this one Democrat, her response to that program, or to that possibility, clip 15.
Now, President Trump says he likes the idea of giving some of the savings from DOGE back to Americans as kind of a dividend. Would you support that?
So, no, we are not in the business of giving out money. And honestly, I don't know what $5,000 will do for you.
Okay, the $5,000 is what got most of the airplay. You know, $5,000 for most Americans is a fairly substantial amount of money. But before that, she says, we're not in the business of giving out money. That's all you do. You take the taxpayers' money and you give it out to all these nonsense programs to the tune of trillions and trillions of dollars. What about giving some of that money back to the people who paid it? No, we're not in that business. Certainly not. Look at that. She's an elected representative in Congress. Does she care about serving people? Serving the people that voted her in? You can't really wrap your mind around people voting for someone like that, but they do. They're all over the swamp. They're all over Congress. This is one on cuts. Where was the one for the CIA? New York Times, it says, the possible purge of officers working on recruiting and diversity comes as the agency moves to comply with the spirit of an executive order banning efforts to diversify the federal workforce. The headline here, CIA plans largest mass firing in nearly 50 years. These are, as I say, these are welcome changes. They're refreshing. But as we'll see in the end, it's too little, too late. Coming back to the reaction to Elon Musk, some of these cuts that he's initiating, that he's suggesting to Donald Trump. Listen, this is actually from Joy Reid, her final day of programming. She's cut because she has 0 ratings. And listen to what she says here about Elon Musk. Clip 10.
This regime that we find ourselves living under is producing massive chaos and trauma in the lives of federal workers and in the country. Just look at this latest round of protests at Tesla dealerships, at town halls. America is resisting in large ways and small. The Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts has seen a 50% drop in ticket sales. Drag queens are showing up to protest outside. America is saying no to Elon Musk running us. We do not want him in charge, period. And Donald Trump, the guy who handed his biggest donor the keys to the whole federal government for him to do whatever he pleases with it, is underwater in every single poll. From Gallup to the Washington Post to CNN to Reuters, you name it. Other than his MAGA cult, nobody wants this chaos and confusion.
Other than the MAGA cult, other than the 77 million Americans who voted for him, nobody wants this. Notice she's referring to numbers. The lady that just got fired because she had no numbers. She's talking about Elon Musk and Donald Trump and the number of people going to the theater or whatever, or the polls that she carefully frames in her narrative. Everybody knows that you should judge by the fruits, the numbers, the productivity. But then when they're not doing that, what do? Well, human nature justifies. It justifies your job by creating these fake values. My show is valuable. My work is valuable. I am important. This is the attitude or the mindset that God is working to obliterate in our minds, in the minds of true Christians, and soon the whole world. As everyone will be taught how that it's more blessed. You'll be blessed by God if you give. It's more blessed to give than to receive. We'll focus on this in our study coming up after this quick break. You're listening to Stephen Fleury, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We'll be right back.
Prosperity, government, trade, technology, stability, freedom. The last 2 centuries have been the exception in human history. How did we get here? The 19th century was dominated by an empire that exported civility, order, standards, and opened the doors for global trade. It ended slavery and implemented a system of governance that protected people's rights. And then in the 20th century, a new power came to dominate. Remarkably, one that would continue in the same traditions as its predecessor. For 200 years, the United States and Britain dominated the world stage. How did these 2 nations rise to prominence so suddenly? And why are their legacies so relentlessly attacked today? The astonishing truth is that your Bible prophesied the rise of Britain and the United States. It also prophesied their fall. The biblical identity of these 2 nations is the vital key that unlocks Bible prophecy. This lost master key to prophecy is revealed in Herbert W. Armstrong's most requested book, The United States and Britain in Prophecy. You must understand the biblical identities of these two nations to comprehend where we are in Bible prophecy today. To learn more about this vital truth, request your free copy of The United States and Britain in Prophecy.
The Senate's even being put to work. Majority Leader Thune is making senators work late into the night. And ready? They're working on Fridays now. Yeah. And no surprise, senators are already complaining. They want to go home. Democrat Senator Mark Kelly, also a pilot, says he used to rent a plane and fly himself home every Friday. Alas, he's barely flown on that plane this year. He says, unless I want to do it on the weekend, and that's if I get back on the weekend. We're $36 trillion in debt because of guys like that. And they're complaining they have to work on a Friday. Not even a summer Friday, a Friday in February.
Public servants. There you go. Public servants. And then, of course, you look at the bottom line, how much they're worth. Coming to Washington for that $200,000 salary. As nice as that would be, for most people, how are they worth $200 million maybe 10 years later? How does that happen? Public servants? Or are they serving themselves? Well, with so many, they're serving themselves. I was saying earlier just about the work that we've got to put in spiritually, the work of being a true Christian. We harp on this constantly at God's college, telling our students, look, you need to produce. You need to produce fruit. You need to overcome. You need to conquer your carnal nature. It says this in the repentance booklet. We have this available for free, no cost, no obligation, a wonderful booklet. Conversion is a lifelong process. My father says to become converted is to have God's thoughts rather than carnal thoughts and emotions and desires. That's very difficult to accomplish and a deep subject to think on. We must constantly grow in our conversion. It says baptism is only the starting point. I mean, that's the beginning of this lifelong journey or this career as a true Christian. Hard work. We tell them, the students that is, that look, your Bible study, if you're not coming away from your Bible study prepared to put it into action, you're deceiving yourself. And it's easy to deceive ourselves with fake values, with humanly devised values. I'm valuable. I'm worth a lot. I'm really contributing. I'm doing so much. Are you? Are we? Look at the parable of the pounds. This is Luke 19 and verse 15. It says, and it came to pass that when he was returned, having received the kingdom, this is speaking of Christ, then he commanded these servants to be called unto him, to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained. Notice he commanded this. You think people don't like receiving an email that takes 30 seconds to answer? One from Elon Musk? What about this? God is going to command his servants to come and give an account. What have you been doing? How much did you gain? How much did you produce? How much did you overcome? How much did you conquer that carnal nature? I mean, this is a message embedded in the Bible. It's everywhere. Obedience to God's commands. Fruitful, productive living, as I said. It's there in John 15, those final instructions that Jesus gave at Passover, his final Passover. And he's talking about how even a fruitful branch needs to be pruned from time to time. You see this in nature. You see it with trees. Verse 16, it says, then came the first, saying, Lord, your pound has gained 10 pounds. And he said to him, well, you good servant, because you have been faithful in a very little, have you authority over 10 cities. You multiplied your goods by 10. I'm going to put you over 10 cities. You're a successful businessman. I'm going to give you a lot of responsibility. Verse 18 says, and the second came, saying, Lord, your pound has gained 5 pounds. And he said, likewise, be you over 5 cities. You get the point? God rewards those who really produce. This is why Jesus said in John 15 that producing fruit brings glory to God. God wants to replicate his ways, his character, his nature, his way of life over the whole world and on into the universe even. And that's what he's doing through true Christians. We're to be zealous, zealous of good works, zealous to perform good works. It says that over in Titus. Verse 20, and another came, saying, Lord, behold, here is your pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin. For I feared you, because you are an austere man. You take up that you laid down not, or laid not down, and reap that you did not sow. Here's your pound back. I didn't do anything with it, and it's your fault. You are an austere man. How dare you command me to come forward and to give you an account of what I've been doing? That's the attitude that this individual had. Verse 22, it says, and he says unto him, out of your own mouth will I judge you, you wicked servant. You knew that I was an austere man, taking up that I laid not down, and reaping that I did not sow. Wherefore then gave not you my money into a bank, that at my coming I might have required my own with usury? I mean, why didn't you at least put it in the bank and accumulate a little bit of interest? He wouldn't even do that. This was not a good steward of God's blessings, of the pound that God gave to him. He just buried it. He kept it for himself. Verse 24 says, and he said to them that stood by, take from him the pound and give it to him that has 10 pounds. Notice that. He gave it to the one that produced the most. God is looking clearly, I mean, this parable shows that God is looking for the largest return possible, the most fruitful and abundant harvest possible. Obviously, as I say, it's a message that runs right through the Bible. Verse 25, and they said to him, Lord, he has 10 pounds. It doesn't make sense humanly. People say, what? Why would you give it to the guy who has the most? Because he's producing, that's why. For I say unto you, that unto everyone which has shall be given, and from him that has not, even that what he has shall be taken from him. But those mine enemies, which would not that I should reign over them, bring here and slay them before me. You see, there are still sectors of the private sector that have this concept. If it's a successful company, I mean, you have to see the bottom line. You have to make cuts, sometimes painful cuts. You have to give employees a review from time to time, just so that they know what you're pleased with, what you're unhappy with. It's common sense. As I said, with respect to Kevin O'Leary, listen to what he said about these cuts that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are making. Clip 8.
Federal government is fat, dripping with fat. 100 years of never being scrutinized, never been examined, never looking for any efficiencies. Finally, here's an individual that's willing to do it for free with extremely great executional skills, and people are uncomfortable. Don't worry about it. The American people want to know how much waste is evident. And I think they're getting answers, and it's not good. You know, in the concept of private equity, when you find a broken, bankrupt company, you look at the spreadsheet, you say, okay, this is the original cut idea. You cut 20% more because it really hurts when you cut. You cut deep, you cut fast, you chop, you hack, and then you hire back because you don't want the trauma to everybody multiple times. I don't think he's doing enough. He's not cutting enough. We should cut more, 20% more. It's all fat. It's waste. There's so much waste in federal government.
He's completely right. We should be cutting more. That's what the controversy should be. Are you really cutting enough? Mark chapter 9, notice this, verse 33. We'll start here. And by the way, I've been searching through a lot of my old sermon messages and notes just to help with some of the research and study for Life and Teachings of Christ. And for whatever reason, most of my go-to material is from the book of Matthew or Luke, as far as the synoptic gospels go. And I've been leaning more towards Mark. Not that they're all just, incredibly different. There's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of events discussed in all three of those synoptic gospels. But God included 4 gospels to bring the whole story together, to make sure that all the detail is there. And Mark does bring out some detail that's very powerful. I would recommend it, just reading the book of Mark. We've been going through Mark 7, 8, and 9 recently in class, among other sections from the Gospels as well. But this is right after Jesus had given them some correction. He was talking about his oncoming crucifixion and resurrection thereafter. And the disciples, no matter how often Jesus brought that up, they just could not accept it. No. At one point, Peter rebuked Jesus. And Jesus had to tell him, "Get behind me, Satan. You're thinking like the devil. You're not thinking like God." I mean, God's concerned about our nature. He's concerned about what's going on in our hearts. He is concerned about our thinking. Get behind me, Satan. He's giving them this profound instruction, preparing them emotionally even, certainly spiritually, for what was coming. And even when it happened, they weren't ready. Now, they didn't have God's Spirit yet. And so many of these disciples turned into spiritual giants after they received the Holy Spirit on Pentecost, and then carried on with their commission to go to those lost sheep. But here in Mark 9, verse 33, it says, "And he came to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, 'What was it that you disputed amongst yourselves by the way?'" So, Christ is teaching them. He's lovingly correcting them. He's a little ways in front of them as they're making their way back to this house. And as it turns out, the disciples were behind him arguing over who would be the greatest, over who is most valuable as far as God's work is concerned. It says, "But they held their peace," verse 34, "for by the way they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest." They held their peace. They kept quiet because they knew their thinking was wrong. They knew their thinking was in opposition to everything Jesus had been teaching them about leadership in God's family, in God's church. They had vanity. That's the way of human nature. Human nature loves to exalt self. Human nature loves to create artificial values and insists that I am valuable. I am important. That's something the disciples struggled with. This is not new to our time. It's especially bad, and you look back at the history of America, by the way, and just the work ethic that contributed to this nation becoming the greatest superpower in history. There's always been that tendency to be lazy and let down and not work hard and to look for the cushy job where you get big pay for doing little or nothing. But it's especially prevalent today. You see so many people who just are not willing to work hard. They lose their grant, they lose their $1 million, and they come crying to the networks. Verse 35, and he sat down and he called the 12, and he said to them, if any man desire to be first or greatest, the same shall be last of all, and servant of all. It's the same message that you can read about over in Matthew 20. If you really want to be great in God's kingdom, then commit your life to serving others, to serving all, as it says here. Now, there's authority in God's family. We just saw it in the parable of the pounds. When Christ returns, he's going to command us to come before him, to come before the judgment seat, to give an accounting. What did we do? How much did we overcome? Where did we grow? How much did we grow? There's another parable that talks about the growth being, with some 30-fold, some 60-fold, some 100-fold. Why would Jesus make those distinctions? Well, because God is actually concerned about what we produce, how much we produce even. That's why he spells it out that way. It's possible for us to produce more, always. Always. If you're, like I've told the students recently, if you're really aiming for Matthew 6:33 as your daily objective, you're going to find that you're getting more and more and more done. We've focused this semester on organizing our lives God's way. It's not easy to do that. But when you do it, the orderliness, the productivity, it really begins to take off. Matthew 16 and verse 25, just coming back to what Jesus was teaching them here, it says, for whosoever will save his life shall lose it. In other words, if you try to do everything you can to save yourself, to take for yourself, to receive for yourself, you're going to lose everything. It says, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. It really is the more blessed way to live, the way of give, the way of service, the way of sacrifice. Just staying here in Matthew 9, Jesus, he's in the midst of this instruction, telling them, look, if you want to be great, you need to be a servant of all. And then, verse 36, he took a child and he set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said to them, whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name or under my authority receives me. And whosoever shall receive me receives not me, but him that sent me. It's astounding, really, when you just read through the Gospels, whether it's Mark or any of the others, and you see how often, even after teaching them something so profound, so mind-blowing, and then they're heading back to a house and, they immediately start to argue over who's going to be the greatest. And yet, even still, Jesus says, hey, he looked at that as another teaching opportunity or moment. He said, hey, what are you guys arguing about? And they were quiet. Then he sat down, then he called them over. Then he takes a little child, he puts him right in the middle of the circle. Then he grabs the child into his arms and says, if you receive this child, in other words, if you approach your service, your teaching, like any parent would or should, with their own child, then you can begin to understand what this is all about. We are here to serve humanity. We're here to serve the world. We're here to serve God's family because God is a family. You can get a lot more or a lot further into that if you want to study mystery of the ages. But we're out of time. I can't go any longer. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We thank you for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you again tomorrow.